Thanks for joining us on Power Lunch. This is Bloomberg Quint. I'm Harsha Subramaniam.
Good afternoon. I'm Ira Dugal. Let's get you the headlines this afternoon. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un sign a comprehensive document in Singapore aiming at the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Equity markets across Asia hold on to gains as investors await more details from the pact inked by Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un.
The NCLT asked Alok Industries creditors to reconsider a plan submitted by RIL-JM Financial. The IBC ordinance and the changes there are to be considered as well.
Kaveri seeds should focus to food crops as it looks to reduce its dependency on cotton.
All right, let's first start with taking a look at how the markets are faring. About 1/3% higher on the Sensex and the Nifty. Yatin's here with us to take us through the market moves. Yatin.
Well, if you look at the large cap end of the market doing well, Nifty above that 10,800 mark. Advance decline also fairly good on the Nifty, 32 advances for 18 declines. And today we have the entire pharma come IT pack doing well. Of course, this comes on the back of the rupee depreciation and the kind of nature of the businesses that they have globally. So we have the likes of Lupin, Dr. Reddy and Cipla. These are the stocks which are gaining in the pharma pack. Top gainers on the Nifty as well. Lupin, Dr. Reddy gaining nearly 5% and trading at the day's high currently. SBI also doing well around the 280 mark, 2% up for that one as well, and huge volumes, almost 1.6 crore shares already traded on the National Stock Exchange for SBI. What's not doing well is, Tata Steel, Hindalco. So the metal and energy pack not doing well. Tata Steel and Hindalco both down 1.5% each on decent volumes. And what's moving on high volumes is TCS. They have AGM on Friday, and ahead of that, the stock is gaining momentum at record highs, and same is the case with Infosys. Stock is flat, but both TCS and Infosys are looking at fresh highs which are coming in trade on decent volume. So the technology pack is doing pretty well in trade.
Thank you so much for that. That's the markets for you. But the big story today, US President Donald Trump signed what he called a very comprehensive document with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The deal caps a highly anticipated summit in Singapore aimed at overcoming decades of hostility between the two nations. Bloomberg's Kevin Chirili now joins us from Sentosa Island in Singapore, where the summit is taking place. Kevin, what more do we know on what's been agreed between the two?
Good afternoon, Harsha. And just within the hour, President Trump expected to make remarks behind me here at the Capella Hotel on Sentosa Island in Singapore. The president agreeing to a document with North Korea leader Kim Jong-un that reportedly, according to photographs of this document, will get the North Koreans to commit to denuclearization. Now, the question becomes, how exactly will the U.S. verify that? And that's where all of the questions in this story now is headed. Within the past couple of hours, President Trump making public remarks after a largely warm meeting with the North Korean leader, as well as the North Korea leader's delegation and top administration officials on behalf of President Trump. And President Trump even went as far as suggesting that North Korea leader Kim Jong-un would even be able to visit at the White House. Now, back in Washington, D.C., Republicans and Democrats alike urging President Trump to try to get to a long-term denuclearization deal with North Korea. The president likely to return back to the United States after he makes his remarks here. But his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is going to travel North Asia with stops in South Korea as well as Japan to try to articulate the U.S. foreign policy going forward with regards to North Korea. Without question, though, this summit is historic. It's the first time a sitting U.S. president has met with the dictator of North Korea.
Kevin Chirili, many thanks indeed for joining us with those details. That's the action from Singapore. We'll, of course, be live when we get more details at the press briefing by the President of the United States.
All right, let's actually listen in to what Trump said after the initial signing of that important document, as he called it.
We're very proud of what took place today. I think our whole relationship with North Korea and the Korean Peninsula is it's going to be a very much different situation than it has in the past. We both want to do something. We both are going to do something. And we have developed a very special bond. So people are going to be very impressed. People are going to be very happy. And we're going to take care of a very big and very dangerous problem for the world. And I want to thank Chairman Kim spent a lot of time together today, very intensive time. And I would actually say that it worked out for both of us far better than anybody could have expected. I think far better. I watched the various news reports. I would say far better than anybody even predicted. And this is going to lead to more and more and more. And it's an honor to be with you. Very great honor. Thank you. Thank you to all of your representatives very much.
It's a historic meet indeed. Very little, though, is known about North Korea outside of what's released by the state media. A dictatorial regime, a hermit nation, faces a number of sanctions and is often considered among the poorest in the world. But it wasn't so in the past. North Koreans were actually twice as wealthy to their Chinese counterparts, it seems, way back till 1989. So what's changed? Here's a report.
After the end of the Korean War, North Korea was a virtually cashless society. Everyone worked for the state and was provided for by the state. And in the communist bloc context of the day, it worked. In 1989, North Koreans were more than twice as wealthy as their comrades in China.
Now we think of them as a hermit kingdom and not trading very much.
William Brown spent his career analyzing North Korea for the CIA.
But actually they were integrated reasonably well into the Soviet planned system of countries.
The loss of support from the Soviet Union after its collapse in 1991 and a series of droughts and floods led to a great famine in North Korea.
The famine pretty much ended the public distribution system in which the North Korean state fed everybody through the ration system. And the government couldn't supply food, so people launched off on their own.
Since then, a strange hybrid economy has emerged. Part government-controlled, where rations are allocated by the state, and part gray market, where currency is earned in the market economy. For example, a textile worker in the state-run Pyongyang textile mill earns around 3,000 won per month, which has a street value of about 40 cents. But that worker pays nothing for housing or utilities and receives food rations. Her sister might legally work for an export-oriented company. She's allowed to get 30,000 won per month, but with fewer perks. Another sister could work for a Chinese company and earn 300,000 won per month, but with zero perks from the government.
All the state workers get paid through this incredibly low-wage system and are dependent on rations that often don't show up. The ideal situation is for one person in a family to work in the state system, and then other people in the family work out in the marketplace and earn real money.
It is a highly inefficient system. In per capita income terms, North Koreans are now 8 times poorer than Chinese and over 20 times as poor as South Koreans. Rather than reform, the government sought to fill a shortfall in hard currency by trafficking illegal goods abroad. According to numerous reports, this illegal business is run by an agency known as Office 39.
It's an office that's organized principally to raise U.S. dollars for the ruling Kim party.
A study from a Washington-based human rights group traces the regime's criminal ventures back to the 1970s, when about a dozen North Korean diplomats were expelled from Scandinavian countries for smuggling alcohol, cigarettes, and hashish. Later, the government switched to foreign organized crime syndicates to sell things like counterfeit pharmaceuticals and heroin manufactured from state-mandated poppy farms. North Korea's government has dismissed such claims, and some analysts have also questioned the data. Since 2005, intercepts of North Korean smuggling have fallen sharply, though more recently claims of cyber theft have proliferated. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un has started speaking to South Korea about opening up for investment in restricted economic zones, and he's also talking about switching to a more China-like economic system. Whether that's a true change of heart or just a tactical retreat in the face of sanctions remains to be seen.
All right, that's North Korea's story. We haven't heard the last of it. We'll have more on it later in the show. But let's move on to insolvency diaries. The NCLT has asked Alok Industries lenders to reconsider an offer made by RIL-JM Financial. Vishnath Nair is joining us here with what happened in court yesterday. Can you give us a sense of what exactly the court said?
So essentially, the NCLT was responding to a petition made by the employees at Alok Industries who were challenging the liquidation order, which is supposed to be passed in the company. 270 days have passed, no plan has been approved by the lenders. what the NCLT took note of was the recent amendment to the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, wherein the government brought in this ordinance saying that only 66% of the lenders need to approve a plan for it to go through, as opposed to 75%, which was earlier. Because of this, the RIL-JM Financial plan could be approved because about 70% of the lenders were in favor of the plan. And the expectation is that now when the lenders meet later this week after the NCLT's order, they are likely to push for the RIL-JM Financial plan as the preferred bidder in the Alok Industries case. The plan was originally rejected because it did not give the lenders adequate value. It was about 5,000 crore as compared to the 30,000 crore debt that the company has. So, obviously that was a problem that the lenders faced before approving the plan. But now it seems it could go through.
It could go through. Thanks for that, Vishnath.
Let's move on. Yes Bank shareholders will vote today on whether Rana Kapoor gets another 3-year term as Chief Executive Officer. Remember, he held the bank since 2004, and a new term will also need to be endorsed by the Reserve Bank of India. And to Anthony reports.
Yes Bank CEO Rana Kapoor is seeking approval for a 3-year term extension as the CEO of the bank today at the annual general body meeting of the shareholders. Rana, who helped building the bank from 2004 onwards and turning it into one of the fastest growing bank in terms of loan growth and one of the most profitable in the country also, is seeking reappointment at a time when the central bank is keeping very close watch on asset quality divergence at these lenders. As you recall, Yes Bank for 2 straight years had recorded record divergences, and this has come for 2 straight years, and which makes it one of the biggest culprits in front of RBI in terms of asset qualification divergence. What we are keenly watching out and what the proxy advisory firms are keenly watching out is how the shareholders will be voting regarding this proposal, and following that, what stance would the banking regulator be taking on this? Because the stance that the banking regulator will be taking on this would be setting the tone for how strongly they will hold the top management accountable for these divergences.
Andrew, thank you for that. Well, talk about good and bad timing. While elevated oil prices helped ONGC's March quarter profits soar to a 4-year high, the surge also eroded the value of its controlling stake in HPCL. Remember, ONGC paid 474 rupees per share to buy 51% stake in HPCL on the 31st of January. That was close to a record high for the refiner. Now that investment has depreciated 34%, as the government is said to have asked oil marketing companies to stop hiking fuel prices. So that's the divergence that you're seeing.
All right. Meanwhile, homegrown Kaveri Seeds wants to expand beyond cotton. The seed manufacturer is keen on growing its presence in the food crop segment, which currently contribute less than 40% to the company's revenue. Nupur Acharya, who spoke to the top management at the company, joins us here. Nupur, what is their game plan?
So cotton has been their mainstay. It's been the breadwinner for the company, and therefore it is accounting for about 60% of the revenue. But now the margins are less, and the cotton crop is prone to more pest attacks. While the margins in a vegetable crop or grains like corn or maize is almost more than double than the cotton crop. So they are trying to reverse this. We'll have more share of vegetables and grains and a lesser share of cotton in their overall portfolio of revenue.
All right, Nupur, thanks so much for that.
All right, the most important story perhaps of this show, the World Cup. The world's most watched sporting event is just 2 days away. The FIFA World Cup on 2018 kicks off Thursday with host Russia taking on Saudi Arabia in Moscow. Every football fan will already have chosen his or her favorite team, but that didn't stop UBS and Commerce Bank from coming out with their predictions. Pretty much like Agam is standing by to tell us, pretty much like the stock picks, where does this stand?
Well, Harsha, we have a whole host of brokerages coming out with their own predictions. And today, let's just talk about UBS as well as Commerce Bank. Now, it may come as a surprise to you, but when you consider the way the teams have panned out and come across the different groups, as you can see, Group B, which has Spain and Portugal, along with Group E with Brazil and Group F with Germany, are the only groups that are expected to move in and do well in the latter stages. And that leads me to the surprising element here, is that as against expectations of a lot that Brazil could go ahead and actually win the World Cup, UBS is assigning the highest probability to Germany at around 24%, and Brazil comes on number 2 at around 20%. And surprisingly, again, while many may want to consider the likes of France and Argentina on the number 3 spot, UBS is assigning a 16% probability to Spain winning the World Cup. Well, moving in terms of the next couple, England is a surprise one, especially considering it really hasn't done very well over the past few World Cups, and France at, well, much later number 5, and in fact Argentina doesn't figure in the UBS list in the top 5. Now that said, let's bring in the group stages, and UBS also has a projection of the top round 16 and the entrance there. So they're expecting Russia to come in, as well as Uruguay, where the key player will be Luis Suarez, the famous Barcelona forward, known for biting people. Let's just hope that he doesn't bite anyone in this World Cup. But moving on to the Group B, again we have Spain. Once again, Spain lacks the bite when it comes to forwards, but it still has a very sound midfield, and of course this passing game. So we will have David Villa there in focus. Ronaldo, of course, for Portugal will stand out. Possibly arguments around Ronaldo being the greatest of all time or no, coming back on the back of winning the 13th UEFA Champions League with Real Madrid is something that will be a booster for Ronaldo, of course. And moving in Group C, we have France again. Antoine Griezmann is going to be the key player here. He's the most sought after striker in Europe, and a lot of teams are vying for him. And of course in Denmark, Christian Eriksen coming on the back of a very successful season with Tottenham Hotspur as well. Now, to take cues with Group D, again, Lionel Messi. It's going to be his last World Cup. And we're just going to have to wait and watch whether or not Lionel Messi this time around can make that difference, because his record for playing for country is not as robust as the kind of record that we've seen for him when he plays for Barcelona. So it's going to be a big one. Luka Modric for Croatia, again, coming back on the fact that he's won the UEFA Champions League, is going to be a booster for him as well. Let's take a look at Group E. Again, that's where we have Brazil. Now, Brazil has loads and loads of talent, and while a lot will say that Neymar is the focal point here, of course, he's a striker, but the midfield, the defensive, it's all there for Brazil to take it in, which is why I'm suggesting that a lot will be surprised by UBS's prediction of Brazil not necessarily winning, and in fact being behind Germany. Of course, Switzerland has its own stars, not necessarily moving to the latter stages, but we have Granit Xhaka from Arsenal and Shaqiri as well coming in. In Group F, we have Germany. Now this is the other big team, and again a lot would contend that Mesut Ozil may or may not be the key player, because it has Toni Kroos, it has Thomas Müller, it has Neuer as a goalkeeper, and all these guys could come well ahead of Mesut Ozil in terms of contribution to moving in the latter half of the stages. And in Sweden, well, this is perhaps a big disappointment to the entire world that there's going to be no Zlatan Ibrahimovic playing for Sweden, and it's all going to be Marcus Berg then. So this may be a little bit of disappointment, and we may have this lack of entertainment perhaps in this particular World Cup. Of course, in Group G, we have England. Harry Kane will be the focal point here. 31 goals scored for the English Premier League in the season. A very, very successful campaign for Harry Kane. And in Belgium, well, again, it's full of stars, full of upcoming players working and playing for the best European teams. Eden Hazard is in focus. We will also have Romelu Lukaku, as well as several other players, which, well, if I start naming them, I'm going to just keep on naming them. So Belgium, however, the key is for them to click as a team. That's going to be important for them. And finally, Group H, we have Sadio Mane for Senegal and James Rodriguez, who has also come up with his own cryptocurrency. Well, these are some of the key watchables in terms of key players as well as countries that we are expecting for them to move on into the round of 16. That's as far as UBS is concerned. Even in terms of Commerce Bank, they are also putting Germany ahead of Brazil. Again, if you consider the odds for winning across several other bookmakers, you'll see them going head to head. But Germany at this point in time, Commerce Bank assigning an 18% probability of them winning the World Cup ahead of Brazil at around 13%. And again, Spain makes it at number 3 at around nearly 10%. That's followed by something like Argentina Argentina. So Argentina makes it to the Commerzbank's list, but it does not make it to the UBS list. And France, of course, again a number 5, which may be surprising for a lot of other, should I say, watchers out there and those audiences. So we watch out for some of these countries, but for now it seems that Germany and, well, perhaps Brazil are favorites to win this World Cup.
All right, thanks so much for that, Tagam. Let's slip into a quick break. Up next, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un have signed a document. We're waiting to hear from the two leaders who are scheduled to address a press conference soon.
Back on lunch, the headlines at this hour. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un sign a comprehensive document in Singapore aiming at denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
European shares trade higher as investors await more details from the pact signed between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Transport infrastructure consultancy RITES will kick off the government's divestment plan in the current financial year.
All right, first let's check in on the markets. 0.5% higher now on the indices, but what stocks are moving? Agam is here with us. Afternoon, Agam.
Good afternoon, Iravel. We are looking at markets advance, a show of strength for the indices, especially the Nifty, which has firmly moved about the mark of 10,800. Though on an intraday basis, we have seen it come off slightly from a day's highs. We've seen strength all the same. When it comes to the broader markets too, when coming down to indices such as the small cap and the mid cap indices, they're also advancing largely in line with the benchmark indices. In terms of those stocks which are showing strength today is well, again, the pharmaceutical space with the likes of Lupin and Dr. Reddy's along with Cipla aiding the indices higher, and we're seeing good gains in something like an SBI as well as Indiabulls Housing Finance. SBI again stands out here, also aiding the Nifty PSU banking index higher as well. On the weaker end, we have a weakness in Hindalco, Coal India and Tata Steel. Tata Steel continues to grind lower, hanging around the mark of 580, and this is of course largely on account of profits being taken after we've had developments with respect to its deal with ThyssenKrupp. So we'll be watching out for that. But on the whole, at least as far as the benchmarks are concerned, looking up and around crucial levels.
Agam, thank you for that. But let's focus to the top story of the day. US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed what they call a very comprehensive document. The deal is set to assert that the US president would provide unspecified security guarantees to Kim in exchange for North Korean leaders' unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. What does this agreement mean for the relationship between the two countries and, frankly, for the rest of the world? Neelam Deo, director and co-founder of Gateway House, joins us on this conversation. Neelam, thank you so much and pleasure having you as always. What have you made of the conversations so far between President Trump and Kim Jong-un? Does this, whatever details that have been revealed so far, does it indicate to you that denuclearization will actually happen?
You know, denuclearization is a process. According to the North Koreans, they've already begun. They had destroyed the site where they have been having nuclear tests earlier. They have already announced that they won't be carrying out any more missile tests, long range particularly. So all of this is part of denuclearization. The Americans, on the other hand, have defined it as CVID, where they say comprehensive, irreversible, verifiable denuclearization. Now, the document invariably says denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That means that the North Koreans have misgivings that there are still some nuclear weapons in South Korea, placed by the Americans. The Americans, of course, have maintained that they had removed them earlier. This too, I think the North Koreans would like this to be verified. Now, many things which are not mentioned, because this is a general statement, are things like who will verify? Will it be the IAEA? Does it mean that the process could take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Is the denuclearization perpetual, forever? Does it mean that they will destroy all their other testing and launch facilities? All of these are going to be part of the negotiations between the North Koreans and the Americans. I think that other countries which might want to be involved and which might actually get involved in some parts of this would be South Korea, whose President Moon, has been the catalyst for these meetings. He has been able to rescue this summit even after Kim Jong-un and President Trump had exchanged messages basically denouncing each other and saying the summit wouldn't take place. At some point, China may want to come in, including as a guarantor for the security of the North Korean regime. Russia has an interest. It has a border with North Korea, and if it is not allowed to come in, then it can always act as a spoiler. Japan's concerns seem to have been left out completely. The Japanese Prime Minister was in Washington just a week ago, pleading again for what is a very emotional public subject in Japan, and that is the return of Japanese nationals who had been kidnapped by the North Koreans in the 70s, 80s. Some of them have in fact been returned, a few are still missing, and a few have been declared dead by the North Koreans. There's no reference to them, and this seems to be important because there is a reference to the exchange of missing soldiers from the two sides in the long and bitter fighting during the Korean War.
Neelam, there is a view that Kim has agreed to have this conversation, shake hands with President Trump because he really doesn't have a choice. That sanctions have really crippled the North Korean economy, and therefore, this was inevitable. Would you subscribe to that view?
Well, there's no question that the sanctions hurt the North Korean economy, but we should also remember that it is one of the most heavily sanctioned countries for the longest time. Despite the sanctions, they have been able to develop a sophisticated nuclear and missile program. And recent photographs shown, films shown of Pyongyang do not appear to be of a country that is completely starved and absolutely as devastated and depressed as earlier Western media had projected. Would Kim like to have the sanctions lightened, removed altogether? Naturally, any country would. Iran wants that done today. When there were sanctions on India, we had wanted them removed. Every country finds American sanctions, and including those that are pushed through the UN Security Council, to be onerous and would prefer to be without them.
Much of this conversation, at least the preliminary conversation between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, is about the chemistry and the optics of it. President Trump went on record to say it's the attitude that matters in making this work. From whatever you have seen so far, has the optics worked?
I think the optics have worked very well. North Korea has had its flag flying alongside that of the American flag. Kim Jong-un has been treated equally as the head of state, just like the American president or any other prime minister or president that the Americans have had talks with. The agreement refers to both sides. The Americans have undertaken to provide security guarantees without which the North Koreans would not commit to denuclearization. I think these are all very important. At one level, they are symbolic, but as the talks between the two countries progress, there will be actual understandings and implementation. Meanwhile, we should always remember that South Korean President Moon campaigned on the basis of improving relations between the two Koreas. He has worked hard for this process, and he will also contribute to taking measures which would improve the North Korean economy. Meanwhile, we know that China has already started to relax sanctions that it had agreed to from under the UN Security Council and under American pressure. At the same time, as I said, if Russia is not involved, then it can always be a spoiler. What will be important is to bring Japan in somehow, because Japan has the capacity to invest in and greatly provide an impetus to the North Korean economy.
Neelam, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us with your perspective. Neelam Deo, co-founder of Gateway House, talking about the significance of the conversations between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. More importantly, both these leaders will be addressing the media in a short while. From now, let's cut across to Bloomberg Network for continuing coverage of the summit in Singapore. We're still waiting for Trump's announcements.
Secretary Pompeo's predecessor, Secretary Tillerson, and President Trump. That no longer exists between Secretary Pompeo and President Trump. Secretary Pompeo brought over his team from the CIA to really begin these negotiations, to be the team that was very much involved. President Trump trusted him so much so that Mr. Pompeo actually traveled to meet with the North Korea leader before he was even confirmed in the Senate. So from here, Secretary Pompeo will travel to South Korea as well as to Japan to continue to articulate U.S. policy moving forward. And President Trump returns home, and he will have to, continue to monitor this situation, but also continue to make the case for why it's different than what North Korea had previously, Francine, agreed to. And of course, it comes at a time in which just a couple of days ago, the president sparking backlash from European allies as well as China for not and Canada for not signing that G7 communique. Trade tensions escalating within the region as well.
Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our team on the ground in Singapore. We'll get plenty more throughout the day. Haslinda Amin, Kevin Cirelli, and Stephen Engel. Now, you can also follow, if you're a Bloomberg customer, our live blog, T-Live, on the Bloomberg. It's been especially good today. Most of our blogs are, but this one I really thoroughly enjoyed. We'll bring you also President Trump's press conference as it happens. So let's keep the conversation on the U.S.-North Korea summit, what it means for geopolitics, but also what it means for global markets. Joining us now, Charles Litchfield. He's Eurasia Group analyst, and Sheila Patel, International Chief Executive Officer at Goldman Sachs Asset Management. Thank you both for joining us on such a historic day. Sheila, the markets are pretty much shrugging it off. So we know that the deal lacks in a deadline, but also on the details of a disarmament. Are the markets just focused on other things, or it's because they can't really figure out what's going on?
I think no one can quite figure out what's going on yet. And there are threads of positive news. You've seen Asia stocks bump up a little bit from the idea that at least the tensions have de-escalated with North Korea, but it's light on facts at the moment. And at this point, after experience of the last several months, the market wants facts, not random news or not bits of news. And so it's not a negative reaction, it's not a super positive reaction, it's a let's see reaction. I would characterize the G7 the same way. It's not great to think about a trade war, but it's also not imminent. There is a chance that this is a lot of discussion and we end up in a reasonable place. And I think that's the hope of many investors.
But were you surprised by the market's reaction to the G7 and the possible trade wars? Because you could argue that actually that peaks world growth.
I would think that I'm not surprised in the sense that it's still not clear what not signing will mean in the long run. Right? I think it certainly escalates the tension. And when you look at the markets, there's so much else that's good news. So the cap on things is geopolitics, and the risk out there clearly that investors worry about is geopolitics.
Charles, the images were actually quite extraordinary, but what did we actually witness? Was it a historic moment? Was it a moment that will lead to lasting peace, or is it more of a facade?
I agree with what Sheila said wholeheartedly. We don't know yet, but it is interesting to watch. I think everyone will have their eyes on the press conference imminently. Perhaps we'll be able to garner some detail from that. There are interesting elements of good news, especially as you mentioned the fact that it will be Pompeo who controls the follow-up and not Mr. Bolton, who's much more skeptical of this deal. But perhaps with the G7, I was a bit more surprised that there wasn't a reaction, given that it was fairly negative news. Obviously, there are no concrete implications to the US not signing, but if you combine that with the imminent imposition of tariffs on US allies, the fact that the allies will somehow have to respond, I would have expected a slightly more negative reaction to than for this press conference, or this deal, which for the moment doesn't have anything concrete.
So what are the details that you want to hear about, Charles? Is it, again, disarmament? Is it also the U.S. getting out of bases in the region? And we just started to have a little bit of reaction from China. I mean, they seem critical in this. Do they need to go and sit down at the table?
Yes, I think we do. We need trilaterals with the South Koreans. We need four-way negotiations in which China is involved, because China is a key player just formally through the 1950s truce, but also just in practice guess, de facto in the region. I think before we talk about sort of denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula or perhaps even a US withdrawal, it's important to see what the economic incentives are for North Korea, whether Western firms, the US, can benefit from that, tap into that, or whether it will mainly be beneficial for China. I think that's what we'll try to guess from the press conference in the days to come.
Sheila, you've just come back from living years in Asia. If we do have something significant today from the news conference, which we're expecting imminently, what does that mean for growth and trade in the region?
Certainly, I think if the news is, as Charles mentioned, suggesting that North Korea could be opened up, that there's opportunities for trade and development, I think that would be a positive. In general, trade amongst Asian countries has improved greatly over the last several years. I know from sitting in Singapore for several years that seeing a unified Korea could be a very interesting thing for the entire region. That said, also remember, North Korea is very far behind. And so when we think about the experiences in the past, and you can go back to several of them here in Europe, of countries reunifying or putting things together, that's a long way off from this conversation, but countries that have a long way to go, such as North Korea does, if they open, that will be a lot of work for them and a potential economic challenge also for the rest of the region to support.
Are you constructive on emerging markets overall? And is it thanks or because of foreign policy, or are you worried because of a rising dollar and Fed hikes?
I'm constructive on emerging markets, and I think we look at them as a place where there is still a strong drive for growth. Obviously, people are most concerned about Fed hikes. You've seen a reaction to the markets as we've had a rising rate environment. But again, I would point out that the rates rises have been related to growth, have been related to good news on the economy. And we've seen some modulation in some of the data, particularly in Europe as well. So I think we still have a positive case for emerging markets, but I'd be selective. Places like India.
India, so you're positive, India?
Yes.
And that's because of growing middle class and...
Growing middle class, the very significant opportunities for development of technology and the business opportunities there. You look at the model of China and you go back 10 years and you say, where are we now in terms of the opportunities that have come for internet commerce, etc. You put that model, obviously with some caveats, onto India, you see the great opportunities for growth and development with an emerging middle class.
And Charles, this seems to be like a very high stakes moment for President Trump personally. Can he spin it and appeal to his base if there is something concrete in the agreement?
I think clearly he can. I mean, I think he's even brought some sympathetic news stations with him to construct a whole sort of narrative around this, which I'm sure he'll do very well. He enjoys these stunts after a rather not particularly satisfactory G7. I think this is a very good opportunity for him to speak to his base and spin this positively no matter what the outcome is.
Okay, I mean, how do you expect the outcome to be? I think we're first of all getting some breaking news out of ABC. I think the president also tweeted. We'll try and get that up for you, but we understand that actually President Trump has given an interview to Fox and ABC, as you say, some of the presenters that he's friendly with. President Trump telling ABC that he trusts the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. This was something that actually was questioned yesterday in the news conference quite a lot by, for example, the New York Times. Is this a gut instinct, or does the White House have checks and balances in whether you go into this agreement or not? He said that he would know within a minute whether he could trust the North Korean leader.
And which is why I think the checks and balances might be somewhat limited, especially for a move of this importance. He's invested a lot of personal capital in it, and so I think it's very unlikely that he walks away from it, even if his advisors feel that there isn't much concrete and that there isn't much imposed on the North Korean regime. He'll probably think that he can always revisit it later. He's got someone he seems to get on with, Mr. Pompeo, involved in the follow-up. So I don't think that this will end up with a walkout. I mean, he's got some lines of text, not very much, about 4 pages, and then there'll be a follow-up, which I'm sure he'll trust Mr. Pompeo on.
Charles, this is quite interesting because about 10 minutes ago, the president tweeted, and it's a video which you can see here on the screen. Now, very uncharacteristically, there's not actually a word, right? So you can't see any content with the video, but does this speak to his base, or is this a message to other world leaders? If you put it in the context of what happened at the G7, does this, weaken him, or does this make him much stronger?
Well, let's separate the two. As far as the base is concerned, I think this is positive. I'm not a specialist of US politics, but speaking to my colleagues in the US team at Eurasia Group, I get the impression that this comes across to a Trump voter or to Trump's base as him managing to do things that previous presidents failed to do. Trump always talks about this mess in North Korea as something that could have been dealt with 25-20, then count down to 5 years ago, criticizing his predecessor. And so I think the base will like that. There's an awareness in the US of North Korea as this crazy, messy place, and if Trump can put his stamp on it, then they will think that's positive. Looking at other world leaders, I don't think it's necessarily net positive or net negative. They know that the North Koreans are using this as their own sort of propaganda attempt, and therefore they won't really see any sort of grand mastery in what Trump has managed to do, but nor will they necessarily criticize this. I think they're much more concerned about what happened to the G7 and how he's talking to US allies, long-standing US allies.
Yeah, we understand that the President of the United States of America is about to go on the podium and actually give his speech on the news conference. Again, let's just remind our viewers and listeners what we know so far. So there has been this agreement. Actually, let's hand it over to the President of the United States, who's talking in Singapore.
Had a tremendous 3 months, actually, because this has been going on for quite a while. That was a tape that we gave to Chairman Kim and his people, his representatives, and it captures a lot, captures what could be done. And that's a great place, has the potential to be an incredible place between South Korea, if you think about it, and China. It's got tremendous potential, and I think he understands that, and he wants to do what's right. It's my honor today to address the people of the world following this very historic summit with Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea. We spent very intensive hours together, and I think most of you have gotten the signed document, or you will very shortly. It's very comprehensive. It's going to happen. I stand before you as an emissary of the American people to deliver a message of hope and vision and a message of peace. Let me begin by thanking our incredible hosts in Singapore, especially Prime Minister Lee, a friend of mine. This is a country of profound grace and beauty, and we send our warmest wishes to every citizen of Singapore who really made this visit so important and so pleasant, despite all of the work and all of the long hours. I also want to thank President Moon of South Korea. He's working hard. In fact, I'll be speaking to him right after we're finished. Prime Minister Abe of Japan, friend of mine, just left our country. And he wants what's right for Japan and for the world. He's a good man. And a very special person, President Xi of China, who has really closed up that border. Maybe a little bit less so over the last couple of months, but that's okay. But he really has, and he's a terrific person and a friend of mine, and really a great leader of his people. I want to thank them for their efforts to help us get to this very historic day. Most importantly, I want to thank Chairman Kim for taking the first bold step toward a bright new future for his people. Our unprecedented meeting, the first between an American president and a leader of North Korea, proves that real change is indeed possible. My meeting with Chairman Kim was honest, direct, and productive. We got to know each other well in a very confined period of time, under very strong circumstance. We're prepared to start a new history, and we're ready to write a new chapter between our nations. Nearly 70 years ago, think of that, 70 years ago, an extremely bloody conflict ravaged the Korean Peninsula. Countless people died in the conflict, including tens of thousands of brave Americans. Yet while the armistice was agreed to, the war never ended, to this day, never ended. But now we can all have hope that it will soon end, and it will soon end. The past does not have to define the future. Yesterday's conflict does not have to be tomorrow's war. And as history has proven over and over again, adversaries can indeed become friends. We can honor the sacrifice of our forefathers by replacing the horrors of battle with the blessings of peace. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we have done. There is no limit to what North Korea can achieve when it gives up its nuclear weapons and embraces commerce and engagement with the rest of the world that really wants to engage. Chairman Kim has before him an opportunity like no other to be remembered as the leader who ushered in a glorious new era of security and prosperity for his people. Chairman Kim and I just signed a joint statement in which he reaffirmed his unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We also agreed to vigorous negotiations to implement the agreement as soon as possible. And he wants to do that. This isn't the past. This isn't another administration that never got it started and therefore never got it done. Chairman Kim has told me that North Korea is already destroying a major missile engine testing site. That's not in your signed document. We agreed to that after the agreement was signed. That's a big thing. For the missiles that they were testing, the site is going to be destroyed very soon. Today is the beginning of an arduous process. Our eyes are wide open, but peace is always worth the effort, especially in this case. This should have been done years ago. This should have been resolved a long time ago. But we're resolving it now. Chairman Kim has the chance to seize an incredible future for his people. Anyone can make war, but only the most courageous can make peace. The current state of affairs cannot endure forever. The people of Korea, North and South, are profoundly talented, industrious, and gifted. These are truly gifted people. They share the same heritage, language, customs, culture, and destiny. But to realize their amazing destiny, to reunite their national family, the menace of nuclear weapons will now be removed. In the meantime, the sanctions will remain in effect. We dream of a future where all Koreans can live together in harmony, where families are reunited and hopes are reborn, and where the light of peace chases away the darkness of war. This bright future is within, and this is what's happening. It is right there. It's within our reach. It's going to be there. It's going to happen. People thought this could never take place. It is now taking place. It's a very great day. It's a very great moment in the history of the world. And Chairman Kim is on his way back to North Korea, and I know for a fact as soon as he arrives, he's going to start a process that's going to make a lot of people very happy and very safe. So it's an honor to be with everybody today. The media, it's a big gathering of media, I will say. Makes me feel very uncomfortable. But it is what it is. People understand that this is something very important to all of us, including yourselves and your families. So thank you very much for being here. We'll take some questions. Wow. It's a lot of questions. Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions for you, if you don't mind. First, the man you met today, Kim Jong-un, as you know, has killed family members, has starved his own people, is responsible for the death of Otto Warmbier. Why are you so comfortable calling him very talented?
Well, he is very talented. Anybody that takes over a situation like he did at 26 years of age and is able to run it and run it tough. I don't say he was nice or I don't say anything about it. He ran it. Very few people at that age, you can take 1 out of 10,000 probably couldn't do it. Otto Warmbier is a very special person, and he will be for a long time in my life. His parents are good friends of mine. I think without Otto, this would not have happened. Something happened from that day. It was a terrible thing. It was brutal. But a lot of people started to focus on what was going on, including North Korea. I really think that Otto is someone who did not die in vain. I told this to his parents. Special young man, and I have to say, special parents, special people. Otto did not die in vain. He had a lot to do with us being here today. Okay, thank you very much.
President, that second question for you, sir, was on the security. The second question is on the security assurances you talked about in your statement. Can you be specific about what assurances you are willing to give to Kim Jong-un? Does that include reducing military capabilities? And just to follow up on your answer.
No, we're not reducing anything. We're not reducing. At some point, I have to be honest, and I used to say this during my campaign, as you know probably better than most. I want to get our soldiers out. I want to bring our soldiers back home. We have right now 32,000 soldiers in South Korea. And I'd like to be able to bring them back home, but that's not part of the equation right now. At some point, I hope it will be, but not right now. We will be stopping the war games, which will save us a tremendous amount of money, unless and until we see that the future negotiation is not going along like it should. But we'll be saving a tremendous amount of money. Plus, I think it's very provocative. Yes, John? Yes, John, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were John Roberts. I looked at you. Looked just much better, right?
We're frequently confused, Mr. President. Mr. President, the joint statement does not talk about verifiable or irreversible denuclearization. Is that a concession on the part of the United States?
No, not at all, because if you look at it, I mean, you said we are going to, let's see here, it will be gone. I don't think you can be any more plain than what we're asking. Issues related to the establishment of the new U.S. DPKR relations, the building. We talk about the guarantees, and we talk about unwavering commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This is the document that we just signed.
Did you discuss with Chairman Kim methods to verify, either with the United States or international organizations, that very process? And do you
yes, we did. Yes, we did. And we'll be verifying. Yeah, we'll be verifying. It'll be verified.
How will it be achieved, Mr. President?
Well, it's going to be achieved by having a lot of people there. And as we develop a certain trust, and we think we have done that, Secretary Pompeo has been really doing a fantastic job, his staff, everybody. As we do that, we're going to have a lot of people there, and we're going to be working with them on a lot of other things. But this is complete denuclearization of North Korea, and it will be verified.
Will those people be Americans or international?
Combinations of both.
Agency.
Combinations of both. And we have talked about it, yes. Yeah, go ahead. Be nice. Be respectful.
I'll be very respectful, sir. What did Kim Jong-un say to you to give you the confidence that for once in the history of North Korea, they are not cheating the system and gaming the world and gaming the people who will have to go in and make sure that they're actually giving up their nuclear arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, very fair question. He actually mentioned the fact that they proceeded down a path in the past, and ultimately, as you know, nothing got done. In one case, they took billions of dollars during the Clinton regime, took billions of dollars, and nothing happened. That was a terrible thing. And he actually brought it up to me. And he said, we have never gone this far. I don't think they've ever had the confidence, frankly, in a president that they have right now for getting things done and having the ability to get things done. And he was very firm in the fact that he wants to do this. I think he might want to do this as much or even more than me, because they see a very bright future for North Korea. So you never know, right? We never know. But I'll tell you what, we signed a very comprehensive document today, and I think most of you have been given that document. But we signed a very, very comprehensive document, and I believe he's going to live up to that document. In fact, when he lands, which is going to be shortly, I think that he will start that process right away. I do. I can only say that I know him for really well. It's been very rhetorical, as you know. I think without the rhetoric, it wouldn't have happened. I think without other things going along, I think the establishment of a new team was very important. They have a great team. But I think he wants to get it done. I really feel that very strongly. There's John. I think, you know, you two guys look alike when the light is right on the The hair is very similar. Let me see who has better hair. He's got pretty good hair, John.
It's the angelic glow of the backlighting, Mr. President, that makes us look so similar. Of course, the denuclearization and nuclear weapons and biological weapons and whatnot is one problem in North Korea. Another huge problem is the horrible record that they have on human rights. Was that discussed at all? Is that something that you will tackle in the
Yes, it was discussed. It will be discussed more in the future, human rights. And what was also discussed in great detail, John, was the fact that, we have, and I must have had I just countless calls and letters and tweets, anything you can do. They want the remains of their sons back. They want the remains of their fathers and mothers and all of the people that got caught into that really brutal war, which took place to a large extent in North Korea. And I asked for it today, and we got it. That was a very last minute. The remains will be coming back. They're going to start that process immediately. But so many people, even during the campaign, they'd say, is there any way you can work with North Korea to get the remains of my son back? Or my father back? So many people asked me this question, and I said, look, we don't get along too well with that particular group of people, but now we do. And he agreed to that so quickly and so nice. It was really a very nice thing, and he understands it. He understands it. So for the thousands and thousands, I guess way over 6,000 that we know of in terms of the remains, they'll be brought back.
The POW MIA issue clearly is a very important one for thousands.
Especially to a lot of people that are...
What do you, President Trump, expect Kim Jong-un to do about the human rights record regarding the North Korean people?
Right. It was discussed. It was discussed relatively briefly compared to denuclearization. Well, obviously, that's where we started and where we ended. But they will be doing things, and... I think he wants to do things. I think he wants to. You'd be very surprised. Very smart, very good negotiator. Wants to do the right thing. He brought up the fact that in the past they took dialogue far. They never were like we are. There's never been anything like what's taken place now. But they went down the line. Billions of dollars were given, and the following day, the nuclear program continued. But this is a much different time, and this is a much different president, in all fairness. This is very important to me. This was perhaps one of the reasons that I won. I campaigned on this issue, as you know very well, John. Okay, whoever those people are, I cannot see you with all the lights, but you don't look like either of the two. Yeah, go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Did you touch on the issue of peace treaty, and also will you travel to Pyongyang anytime soon?
Well, at a certain time I will. I said that will be a day that I look very much forward to at the appropriate time. And I also will be inviting Chairman Kim at the appropriate time to the White House. I think it's really going to be something that will be very important. And he has accepted. I said at the appropriate time. We want to go a little bit further down the road. But what we signed today was a lot of things included. And then you have things that weren't included that we got after the deal was signed. I've done that before in my life. And we didn't put it in the agreement because we didn't have time. And I think most of you have been handed out the agreement or soon will. But you have not? Okay. Well, if you could have those agreements passed out. We just finished them just a little while ago. But if you could have the agreements passed out, you'll see what we're talking about. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I will second the congratulations, President.
Thank you.
What part did Japan play, and did the abduction issue come up?
Yes.
And also, the fate of the Christians. And the follow-up question is, when will you be doing an interview with Japanese TV? 50,000 American troops are in Japan.
That's true.
Again.
50,000 great troops. That's true. Yeah, it did. Abduction, absolutely. This is Prime Minister Abe's, one of his, certainly, other than the whole denuking subject, certainly I would say his main point. And I brought it up, absolutely. And they're going to be working on that. It will be. We didn't put it down in the document, but it will be worked on. Christians, yes, we are brought it up very strongly. You know, Franklin Graham spent and spends a tremendous amount of time in North Korea. He's got it very close to his heart. It did come up, and things will be happening. Okay? Thank you. Great question. Yes, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, John.
Returning to the question of human rights, you spoke very powerfully on the issue during your State of the Union address. You showed that you had the defector in the First Lady's box with the crutches who escaped. And you, at that point, said that North Korea has more brutally oppressed its people than any other regime on earth. Do you still believe that is the case, having sat down with Kim Jong-un? And does it need to change that?
John, I believe it's a rough situation over there. There's no question about it. And we did discuss it today pretty strongly. I mean, knowing what the main purpose of what we were doing is, denuking, but discussed it at pretty good length. We'll be doing something on it. It's rough. It's rough in a lot of places, by the way. Not just there, but it's rough. And we will continue that, and I think ultimately we'll agree to something. But it was discussed at length outside of the nuclear situation, one of the primary topics.
But do you think that needs to change to bring on this glorious new era you've talked about? Are they going to have to?
I think it will change, yeah. I think it probably has to, but I think it will. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Steve, that's you, Steve, right there.
Yes, sir. Thank you. What timetable do you envision for their denuclearization? And in the meantime, are you thinking about easing any sanctions?
Well, you know, scientifically, I've been watching and reading a lot about this, and it does take a long time to, you know, pull off complete denuclearization. It takes a long time. Scientifically, you have to wait certain periods of time, and a lot of things happen. But despite that, once you start the process, it means it's pretty much over. You can't use them. That's the good news. And that's going to start very, very soon. I believe that's going to start very soon. We will do it as fast as it can mechanically and physically be done, Steve.
And the sanctions?
The sanctions will come off when we are sure that the nukes are no longer a factor. Sanctions played a big role, but they'll come off at that point. I hope it's going to be soon, but they'll come off. They, as you know, and as I've said, the sanctions right now remain. But at a certain point, I actually look forward to taking them off, and they'll come off when we know we're down the road where it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Congratulations on this historic summit.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to everybody, by the way. Congratulations to everybody. Go ahead.
You signed a document with Kim Jong-un. It's essentially a piece of paper. Yesterday we had a briefing from the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and he said the following: many presidents previously had signed off on pieces of paper, only to find that the North Koreans either didn't promise what we thought they had or actually reneged on those promises. What makes this time different, Mr. President?
Well, you have a different administration. You have a different president. You have a different Secretary of State. You have people that are, you know, it's very important to them, and we get it done. The other groups, maybe it wasn't a priority. I don't think they could have done it if it was a priority, frankly. I don't think they honestly could have done it even if it was a priority. And it would have been easier back then. Would have been, for me, it would have been much easier if this were 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And I'm not just blaming President Obama. I mean, this goes back for 25 years. This should have happened. I was given a very tough hand. I was given this. I was given the Iran deal and plenty of other problems. But we're doing really well. And the Iran deal, I have to be honest, I did it because nuclear is always number one to me. Nuclear is number one. But on the Iran deal, I think Iran is a different country now than it was 3 or 4 months ago. I don't think they're looking so much to the Mediterranean. I don't think they're looking so much at Syria like they were with total confidence. I don't think they're so confident right now. But I hope, with that being said, I hope that at the appropriate time, after these sanctions kick in, and they are brutal, what we've put on Iran, I hope that they're going to come back and negotiate a real deal, because I'd love to be able to do that. But right now it's too soon for that.
Yes, please.
Mr. President, you also talk about establishing diplomatic relations, exchanging ambassadors. How long before that happens?
Good question. Hopefully soon, but we'll have to get things moving first. A little bit early for that. We have to get things moving. Yes, go ahead. Hi.
Can you clarify when you said you're stopping war games? So you are stopping the military exercises with South Korea?
Yeah, we've done exercises for a long period of time working with South Korea. And we call them war games, and I call them war games, and they're tremendously expensive. The amount of money that we spend on that is incredible. And South Korea contributes, but not 100%, which is certainly a subject that we have to talk to them about also. And that has to do with the military expense and also the trade. So we're doing that. We actually have a new deal with South Korea in terms of the trade deal. But we have to talk to them. We have to talk to many countries about treating us fairly. But the war games are very expensive. We pay for a big majority of them. We fly in bombers from Guam. I said it when I first started. I said, where do the bombers come from? Guam, nearby. I said, oh, great, nearby. Where's nearby? 6.5 hours. 6.5 hours, that's a long time for these big, massive planes to be flying to South Korea to practice and then drop bombs all over the place and then go back to Guam. I know a lot about airplanes. It's very expensive. And I didn't like it. And what I did say is, and I think it's very provocative. I have to tell you, Jennifer, it's a very provocative situation when I see that and you have a country right next door. So under the circumstances that we're negotiating a very comprehensive, complete deal, I think it's inappropriate to be having war games. So number one, we save money a lot. And number two, it really is something that I think they very much appreciated.
Does North Korea give you something in return, though?
Well, we've gotten, I've heard that. I mean, some of the people that, I don't know, maybe they really mean it. I don't always want to go against the press because I just don't, especially not today. This is too important. But I noticed that some of the people were saying that the president has agreed to meet. He has given up so much. I gave up nothing. I'm here. I haven't slept in 25 hours, but I thought it was appropriate to do because we've been negotiating for literally round the clock with them and with us and with John and with Mike and a whole team of very talented people. But we haven't given up anything other than, you're right, I agreed to meet. And I think the meeting was every bit as good for the United States as it was for North Korea. But I just wrote down some of the things we got. And they got a meeting. But only a person that dislikes Donald Trump would say that I've agreed to make a big commitment. Sure, I've agreed to take a period of time and come here and meet. And that's good. But I think it's great for us and as a country, and I think it's good for them. But